Why you keep choosing relief over real clarity. There is a moment when something inside you wants to understand, but something else wants relief first. A question stays open. A feeling remains unclear. A decision has not settled yet. And instead of waiting for the thing to become truly clear, the mind starts leaning toward whatever reduces pressure fastest. An answer, a conclusion, a story, a certainty. Not because it is right, because it is easier to hold. This is the pattern. You do not always choose what is most honest. Very often, you choose what is most relieving, what stops the tightening, what lowers the noise, what makes the uncertainty feel less exposed. And because that relief is real, the choice begins to feel wise. But relief and clarity are not the same thing. Relief ends strain. Clarity reveals truth. Sometimes they meet. Often they don't. That is why certain answers feel so good at first and so unstable later. They gave the system something to stand on, but they did not necessarily show what was actually there.
What makes this pattern so difficult to notice is that relief does not feel shallow. It feels intelligent. You think you are resolving something, that you are arriving at a real conclusion, that you are finally seeing clearly. But often, what you are really sensing is the body getting a little quieter. The pressure drops, the inner friction softens. The mind stops straining against the open question. And because that shift feels immediate, the answer that caused it starts looking trustworthy. This is the confusion. The system is not always saying this is true. Sometimes it is only saying this is easier. And easier has enormous persuasive force when you are tired, uncertain, or already emotionally activated. That is why relief can so easily borrow the voice of clarity. It gives shape to what felt exposed. It gives language to what felt unfinished. It gives a place to stand when standing inside openness had become too uncomfortable. But a place to stand is not always the place where truth is. That is why the pattern keeps repeating. The mind keeps choosing what settles it fastest, then calling that settlement understanding.
This is why relief can start feeling more trustworthy than truth. Truth is often slower. It does not always arrive with a clean sentence, a sharp answer, a sudden certainty. Sometimes it arrives as more complexity, more honesty, more waiting, more willingness to stay with what is still unclear. But relief does not ask for that. It only asks to be chosen. And once it is chosen, the mind starts building around it. Now the quick answer feels meaningful. The fast conclusion feels mature. The premature certainty feels like strength. This is where the pattern deepens. You stop asking, is this actually clear? And start asking, can I live with this answer without feeling so much pressure? That question quietly changes everything. Because now, you are no longer choosing what reveals most. You are choosing what disturbs least. And once that becomes the standard, real clarity starts losing ground. Not because it disappeared, because it is often less soothing at first than the answers that arrive too soon.
What makes this pattern even more persuasive is that choosing relief can feel responsible. You tell yourself you are not avoiding, you are deciding, clarifying, moving forward. But often, what is really happening is that the mind has stopped tolerating the open process. The answer does not arrive because it finished ripening. It arrives because the strain of waiting has become too much. That strain matters because once it rises high enough, almost any answer can begin to look useful. Not because it is deep, because it closes the gap. It turns uncertainty into something named, something placed, something easier to carry. This is why relief can feel so mature. It has shape, direction, finality. But finality is not the same thing as truth. Very often, the answer you choose under pressure is not the one that reveals the process most honestly. It is the one that makes the process stop hurting first.
This is why relief can become a hidden compass, not pointing toward what is true, toward what is easiest to stop feeling. A painful possibility gets softened, a hard question gets narrowed, an unclear situation gets turned into a clean explanation. And because the mind can finally rest a little, the explanation starts feeling earned. But what earned it was not depth, only timing. It arrived at the exact moment the system wanted the pressure to end. That is what makes this pattern so costly. You do not only lose patience, you lose contact with what was still trying to become clear in a slower, less comfortable way. This is why some answers feel finished, but leave a residue. Something in you is still not fully with them. A hesitation, a return, a small friction that says, this closed too soon. But by then, the mind has already decided that relief must mean understanding. And once it believes that, it keeps choosing what soothes first and listening later. This is why choosing relief can feel so sensible while quietly distorting everything. The mind is not thinking, I want something false. It is thinking, I need something I can survive right now. That difference matters, because once survival tone enters the process, clarity is no longer the real priority. Stability is. The answer that gets chosen does not have to be the most accurate one, only the one that gives the system somewhere to land. This is where the pattern becomes personal. You start trusting yourself less when clarity is slow. You start believing that if something were true, it would already feel cleaner, easier, more settled. But many true things do not arrive that way. They ask more of you. More patience, more honesty, more tolerance for not yet knowing. Relief asks for less. That is why it wins so often. Not because it is deeper, because it is easier to live inside for the next few minutes. And when the next few minutes matter more than the deeper process, the mind keeps choosing what calms first over what clarifies honestly. This is why choosing relief can feel so sensible while quietly distorting everything. The mind is not thinking, I want something false. It is thinking, I need something I can survive right now. That difference matters, because once survival tone enters the process, clarity is no longer the real priority. Stability is. The answer that gets chosen does not have to be the most accurate one, only the one that gives the system somewhere to land. This is where the pattern becomes personal. You start trusting yourself less when clarity is slow. You start believing that if something were true, it would already feel cleaner, easier, more settled. But many true things do not arrive that way. They ask more of you. More patience, more honesty, more tolerance for not yet knowing. Relief asks for less. That is why it wins so often. Not because it is deeper, because it is easier to live inside for the next few minutes. And when the next few minutes matter more than the deeper process, the mind keeps choosing what calms first over what clarifies honestly. Once this becomes visible, something begins to shift. Not because relief stops calling to you, but because relief is no longer confused with clarity. You begin to feel the difference between an answer that quiets you and an answer that actually fits. That difference is subtle. One gives quick rest, the other keeps holding even after the pressure drops. That is what starts to matter.
Not what helped you breathe first. What remains honest when breathing is no longer the main issue? This is where the pattern begins to loosen. You stop treating every soothing answer as if it had earned the right to be trusted. You let some questions stay open longer. You let some meanings ripen more slowly. You stop demanding that truth arrive in the same shape as relief. And because of that, something deeper becomes possible. Not perfect certainty, better contact. The kind that does not rush to close the process just because the strain became hard to carry. That is where real clarity starts separating itself from whatever simply felt better first. This is inner cognition.